Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, Diamonds. Here we are. We're back again. Tony, Wyatt, Luke, and Justin, who might bring maybe more intel than any of us combined on this. We were talking offline about the best types of braided fishing line. And we're in particular talking about inshore saltwater fishing. So we're talking anywhere from 8 on the low end pound, mostly 10, which is what we recommend for most scenarios, 15 and really up to 20. So Justin, why don't you start? Because like we were offline, we're talking about PE line versus fuse versus gel spun, and we have all these different things. And I saw this one suffix is talking about 8 braided fibers and 32 weaves per inch. What the heck does all this stuff mean?
There is so much that goes into the construction of braid, and we'll get into talking about all the different terms and all the different types of braids that are on the market, both brands and what's a braid, what is called a PE line, what is a fused line like Nanofill or Fireline. We'll get into that too. But at the end of the day, all the braided line is gel spun polyethylene. Okay. Dyneema and Spectra are the two brands of line. They're like trade names that a lot of people are familiar with. Spectra being Power Pro by I think the company we've talked about. It's called Honeywell, and a lot of these different companies, like Daiwa or Power Pro, or there's Fins, there's Suffix. We've got a couple examples in front of us. They all work with similar types of fibers, and then they add unique things to them. Like Suffix will add a Gore-Tex fiber, or J-Braid by Daiwa uses what they call Izanis, and it's a particular fiber used in the center. And that changes the property of the line. But when people think braided line, initially for many, many years, the line that people think of is Power Pro because it's been out the longest. It's a Spectra product by Honeywell. It's a 4-strand carrier. And what that means is there's 4 fibers that are woven together to give it its shape. And it's done in such a way that, it's round, it's limp, it's thin, it's very, very strong with zero stretch, and it casts a mile. And it's been out there for a long, long time. A lot of people that made the switch from monofilament to braided line went into using Power Pro. That was the go-to. And since that time, and since the explosion of braided line, I'd say in what, guys, like the mid 90s, late 90s, definitely early 2000s, a lot of people were saying, what's braided line? Like, all I need is 10 pound to fight, 50, 100-pound tarpon. That's it. And people started really putting more attention and focus on it. But it is gel spun polyethylene, Dyneema or Spectra. They're virtually the same thing. It's how the line is put together and heated or treated or coated that starts to affect the overall property of the line.
Mine was spider wire was first for me personally, and that was in the 90s for sure. I remember Chris Bachman, he brought it over one time. We were bass fishing, and he's like, "Man, have you seen this new stuff? It's braided line." I was like, "What in the world? That's garbage. No one's ever going to use that stuff." Here we are today.
I thought the same thing. I was very slow to make the transition too. It took me until fishing with Nick Turner, who I ended up doing tournament fishing with later, and he was just casting further than me, and he was catching more fish, and it was driving me crazy. So I made the plunge to Power Pro, just as you said, Justin. That was my first one, and I quickly realized how beneficial it is, and I literally have not used mono since.
All right. So you mentioned the 4. Now we've got 8s, right? So, we've been doing some testing here with this J-Braid 8. What is it? What are they going up to now? How many strands?
So for most consumers, 8-strand braid is the highest. Braids do go up to 12. Off the top of my head, I can't figure out what carriers go up to 12. I think Berkeley has a particular line that goes up that high as well. And all it is it's smaller fibers, more of them. And the more fibers you have, in theory, the rounder the line truly is. An 8-strand braid is more round than a 4-strand braid. But what you'll notice on the difference between, say Power Pro, that is a 4-strand braid, to an 8-strand braid, is that it's a lot smoother when you jump up into an 8-strand braid. Power Pro does kind of have a coarse feel to it. And overall, it doesn't necessarily affect the abrasion, or it doesn't affect the performance of the line per se. I used to think that abrasive lines or coarse lines like Power Pro might chip guides or might damage tackle. But over time, we've got a lot of guys using it for a long, long time and don't have that issue. I had always gone the route of using a smoother 8-strand braid. Daiwa has the regular J Braid 8, and then we carry the J Braid 8 Grand, which incorporates this Isanus material as their core fiber in the center, and it makes it more abrasion resistant. That was the means of implementing that as their main fiber. It's likely hydrophobic. It's probably a little more dense of a fiber material in the center. But overall, the outer 7 strands of that braid, when put together, are going to feel a lot smoother than a Power Pro, if you put it in your hand.
All right, I'm going to put a note for Jake. He's going to have to look up hydrophobic. Hydrophobic. You're always bringing the big words to these podcasts.
Oh, I didn't even want to get into HMPE, like ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. I was like, no, I'm not going to touch that one. This goes deep. There's a lot of science behind it, but all you need to know, 4-strand, Power Pro, traditional Power Pro, little coarse, great for casting distance. And we are fishing the J Braid 8 Grand as well as a team. A little bit smoother, still very, very limp line, but we'll kind of dive into performance and on the water reviews from you guys here as well as some other lines like Suffix, we've all used in the past.
Yeah, and fins, and I know like you got some of that Beyond Braid they keep advertising. I think even some false advertising we might go into a little bit later. It's a whole another issue there. So is just to kind of knock one subject off before we get into the next one, is 8 doesn't sound like it's always better than 4, right?
It's really applicable. I've inherently leaned more towards using an 8-strand braid because it is my belief, and I think we're going to test this out, Luke, and find out for sure that a smoother 8-strand braid, diameter for diameter, against a Power Pro or a 4-strand braid, casts a little bit better. It's a little bit softer. It's a little bit limper. There's less friction. And over the years, I have had guides chip on rods by using, I think, the original Suffix Performance braid. I think that was a 4-strand braid. It was kind of a silver and gold label before they came out with 832. And I've chipped guides, and I always wondered, well, is it because my braid's abrasive? I mean, back then I had no clue.
Or because you always have that fan running right near your rods, right by, we're looking at it.
That's what it is for sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I said I've used 8-strand braids for a long time, whether it's Suffix, whether it's J Braid 8. I think Seagar also makes a tournament Smackdown braid that was really, really, really thin and very smooth. But man, it's like way thinner than everything else, and it gets to be a little dangerous. There is such a thing as too thin of braid, especially when fishing on the flats. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, and between the 8 to 4, so I've been doing some testing, some casting contests where I have the same reel, the same rod, and everything's in the same weight, just the casting weight. Everything's the exact same except for the line. I've tested out. Power Pro's been the one I started with, so that's always kind of been the control in these tests. And so I've done the Power Pro, original Power Pro, compared to the 8. So they're super slick, which is 8-strand. I don't know about their diameters. I can't remember if the diameters are the same or not, but the actual Power Pro casted further, which surprised me. So I was under the impression that the smoother line would cast further, and that's not always the case. So far in testing, I haven't seen consistent that the 4 is better at X and the 8 is better at Y. A lot of it's line specific. In some cases, like the Spiderwire Invisibraid, it actually did great on the casting at day 1, but it has a coating on the outside of it, and after you use it for say like a couple weeks, that coating starts wearing off, and it went from a great caster to a horrible caster. It ended up being my least favorite line I've tested so far, and it's because of, and again, I thought that was my first 8-strand that I tried, and so I was like, oh man, like this is great. Smoother line, it casts further, and then I was just like totally disappointed. So some of these lines, you have to think about the long-term aspects of it. Some of the lines wear down really fast, or like a wax coating, for example, which is a big pro at the beginning, it wears off, and now it's now all that fiber, I guess I'm assuming that fiber is kind of loose and it's just catching the air, and it significantly decreases casting performance.
Yep. And Yeah, go for it, Justin.
I remember when I think it was right around the time that Suffix 832 first came out, and working, I've worked at tackle shops in years past, and guys would say, how do I know, which braid is a quality braid, and how would I know which one's not? And there was a trick people would do. They would take the line and they'd try to put it up, and they'd pinch it and push it together to see if the braid strands would separate. And we would look really closely at these fine fibers and see which ones were more packed tight, as opposed to which ones would have more space in between them if you push them together. Because when you cast, in a moment's notice, these lines are kind of compressing together, and the thought was, if you can see more space in between these fibers, then you might be more prone to wind knots. More fibers on an 8-strain brand may mean that, but over time, I think we'll be able to tell from just on the water testing.
Yeah, that's why I take a microscope out on the water every time I go.
Super handy to have.
So Luke recently, and we're talking about Tony and Wyatt, what happened. So Luke did a test. We shared it with our insiders, and kind of Power Pro in general has been our go-to. If you've been following us here at Salt Strong, we're not sponsored by any of these groups, but we've always liked Power Pro. It's just worked. It's and not just that, it's been winning pretty much most of the knot contests and strength contests. And then finally, Daiwa J Braid beat it, right, Luke? So talk about that, and then Tony and Wyatt kind of share what happened with you guys in particular with this 10-pound J Braid.
Yeah, so I've been testing in these contests. I've been doing 3 contests on the lines, and so one is on just the overall knot strength, right? So I'll tie knots, I'll pull them, measure the breaking strength, and then also casting contests. And that's again what I mentioned before, where I equalize everything, same rod, same reel. The only difference is the line and the same weight. And then abrasion resistance. And for braid, the abrasion is really tough to measure, so that's been a little bit tougher. But for the braid, I specifically focus on casting distance and strength, because those are really the two. In most cases, your leader is going to be rubbing up against the abrasion stuff. So the abrasion is not quite as important as it is with like fluoro and mono lines. But anyhow, so on the knot contest one, this is the J Braid 8 grand. I've done a ton of tests with a bunch of lines on knot strength. It's the easiest, right? I can just do it right here at the house. It's in a controlled environment, and generally I'm using 10-pound line just to keep everything the same. And in general, the breaking strength with the FG knot on a 10-pound braid to a 30-pound leader is my test case. It's usually around like 17 to 21 pounds at best. And when I got this J Braid 8, the first time I did it was 23 pounds, and I was just like, wow, I was pretty amazed. Next time was 25 pounds. So this is a 10-pound line, 25-pound breaking strength. I was totally blown away. So this is the line that has had the strongest breaking strength I've ever seen on a 10-pound braid. So for that alone, I was extremely impressed. I use it as well, and I did have a decent sized snook. It was probably 27 inches, just under the slot, but it had me around 2 pilings, and I had to pull it up current around these 2 pilings, and the line was, the braid was all over the pilings with oysters, and it survived as well. So I was, at least for the strength side, this has been very impressive. But there's a pro and con to everything, and I'll let Tony and Wyatt go on the con part of it.
Yeah, so I know Luke likes to do a lot of the controlled stuff, the testing and all that. But when it comes to how I like to test out products, take it out on the water, use it real life scenario. And I had a big problem with wind knots on the J Braid, the 10-pound. I usually use Power Pro originally, always use the 4-strand Power Pro. Then I recently switched to the V2, the slick, and wasn't having any issues with that. Switched to the J Braid, the 10-pound. First trip out, it was like every 3 or 4 casts I was having issues with wind knots. And I know Wyatt was having sort of the same issue as well, right?
Yeah, I was out filming an insider report. It was actually, for those who've been keeping up with the insider reports, the ones that we put up each week. This was the first part of that 3 redfish series that I've been doing. If you notice, I switched rods kind of halfway through that report. It was just like every couple casts, I was getting really bad wind knots. with that J braid. I actually ended up taking the reel off the rod because it's a rod that I really like, throwing the reel in the back of my kayak crate and putting my other reel on that rod just because I couldn't continue to use it. It was, you know, I was having to cut line, tie on new leader. It was becoming a hassle, and there was fish. I could see them everywhere, and it was just costing me time. Being efficient on the water, you know, I can't have those kind of mistakes happen. And I know that I spooled it right. And I'm used to using the original Power Pro as well. I've used the Slick V2, Tony, as you mentioned, but you know, as Luke mentioned as well, that waxy coating that's on those, I've had it wear down, and I'd rather just stick with the original Power Pro, just because I don't have to worry about losing that casting distance. I've not had any wind knot issues with the V2. I have had wind knots with the Power Pro, the original Power Pro. Not had any issues like that with the V2, but I don't like losing out on casting distance. So I've just traditionally stuck with the original Power Pro. But yeah, that J braid in that report, I couldn't continue using it that day just because I was getting so many wind knots.
Was it an exceptionally windy day for both you guys?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe it wasn't. I started out the day in it's kind of like a creek where I launched from, and it was wind protected, and I was casting around, having issues. Once I got out into the main area, it was a little windier and still having some issues. But, you know, I'm fishing from a kayak 99% of the time. I always have the wind to my back just so I can get a better cast. So I don't think it was the wind in that case. Some people also do say like how you spool it on the reel plays a big part. But honestly, when I put Power Pro on, I tie it onto my reel, I throw the spool on the ground, and the spool's flying everywhere, hitting the dog, hitting the walls. And I still never have issues with wind knots on the original Power Pro.
Yeah, White, is that how you spooled yours up too when you did the?
No, that contraption that you made, if anybody hasn't seen that video, the one with the cardboard box and the pencil, I did that. And I actually had resistance applied as well. I put a little block in the cardboard box so that it applied extra pressure, so that I knew that when it got spooled on there, it had good pressure. There was nothing that got let up. It was honestly, I was really excited to use it. It was on a brand new reel, that ballistic 2500 that we carry. I was so excited to get out and use it because it was perfectly spooled up on a brand new rod, brand new reel. And it was just, I was having so many problems with it. It was very frustrating.
Yeah, so Jody used it as well, right?
I've been using it on 2 of my reels, this 10-pound, and I got one in gray, and I found one in this blue color. I don't know that the island blue doesn't make a difference, but yeah, I've had 0 issues. But I had issues with the suffix. To me, that this is like my worst enemy. And I think a lot of it's too, like, you know, we've had people, and we obviously were big into Shimano and had some issues there. And like, I've never had any issues with any of my Daiwas, and some have been dunked multiple times now. And yet you get someone who buy their first Daiwa and they're like, oh, this thing sucks. It fell apart. And, you know, I don't know. Some of it could just be bad luck or something, or just a bad trip. But I used some of that suffix, and I had kind of like you guys, just like nightmare. I was like, all right, I'm done with this stuff. Go back to what works. So, and you use, Justin, you kind of are both, right? It sounds like you're less Power Pro and more Daiwa, J braid, and suffix, or fins, or what else?
I have not used original Power Pro, guys, in like 10 years. I've used
that's
suffix.
So 1999.
Well, I don't know. I'm very much I want to use the newest thing out there. I want to test the newest thing on the shelf. I've just tested a lot of products over the years, and I mean, not for any extended period of time. I think every like year and a half or maybe 2 years max, I'm changing out my braids on all my flat stackle. And I mean, from Power Pro to regular suffix, I think like my go-to lines now have either been a J braid 8 grand, but admittedly, I have not popped them on my inshore setups. I have a 30-pound on both my BGMQ 6000 and another prototype 6000 I'm playing with, and I've been fine with the bigger braids, 20 and 30 pound. But for smaller stuff, I've had Suffix 832 on 4 different setups, and every once in a while I get wind knots. But I've been running this stuff for a long time. Suffix 832 has been out for a while, and I've done well on it. I've fished it in tournaments. I've won tournaments. I've, caught 35 and 40-inch reds around structure on this 10-pound braid, and I personally haven't had the bad experience with it. So I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like once you try a couple different things, like I've tried Power Pro V2 before. I liked it. It came in a timber brown color, which I thought was unique. And as the lagoon water was a little dirtier, I was like, okay, timber brown, maybe it'll blend more with the water. And I switched from that because I felt that over time that line actually swelled a little bit, and I felt that the diameter got to be a little bit thicker. I was like, well, I think that's affecting casting distance. So this has kind of been my go-to most of the time, but I'm going to be loading up 2 of my inshore setups with the J-Braid 8 Grand and 10 pound to try it myself and see if I have similar results to Tony and Wyatt. I want to try it all. I want to try everything. And I think everybody's experience ends up being a little bit different.
Yeah, you're the first guy I've ever met that bought doo-doo brown colored line. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, all natural.
They call it number 2 for a reason. V2 in the poo color.
Does anybody here match their line to their rod and reel setup? That's the question.
I did that once fishing with C. Richardson, and he gave me so much grief for it. I quickly ripped it off. How about you, Tony? Are you asking because you do it, or because you wanted to rip on me as well?
No, just wondering. I mean, I have this setup here. It's got the gray and the silver and all that. So
it looks sharp.
This is the V2. But I'm usually a moss green kind of guy.
I'll add on the suffix. So I tested that one out as well. The line was okay. I would say if anybody's using it, especially if anybody's new and is about to start using it, be very careful with your knots because this performed terribly with knots. But there was just one trick that made it not so bad, is that it has a little wax coating on there, similar to that spider wire, but not as bad. But some knots were slipping. I had the issue with the double uni as well as the FG knot when I was doing the knot contest. This is the only line I've ever had the actual knot slip during a knot contest. But what fixed it is if you just get your fingernail and just rub the line, rub that wax off the line, that'll help your knots make sure that your knots stay in place. So if you're using any sort of wax coated line for that matter, but 832 and the Invisibraid are the 2 that I've seen that have the biggest impact with the wax. Just make sure to rub it off. It won't weaken the line. It actually makes the knot stronger, which is again, like this is the only line. It literally happened 3 times. It happened twice during the knot contest, and once I lost one of my casting weights because I was trying to launch that weight and it just flew off. So be careful with that.
But now you're getting glycerin off your fingers and your fingernails on the line. That sounds like a horrible idea. Unless, of course, you have your Dr. Juice hand and lure cleaner.
Of course.
So I think a good topic too is, or actually a misconception that I see a lot of is abrasion resistance. Especially somebody such as myself. I came from bass fishing, went into inshore fishing, and we tie straight braid with bass fishing to our lures. We're fishing in grass, and we have no problems getting those fish out. And it's a matter of soft structure versus hard structure. Braid is really good for cutting through grass if you're fishing thick, vegetation, because it's so thin. Like, when you're tying knots, you cut your finger because it's a soft tissue. So, if you're using braid for, inshore grassy areas, it works really well for abrasion resistance. But if you're fishing harder structure, rocks, pilings with barnacles on it, as soon as it touches that with any amount of pressure, it will break off. That's another reason why we use leader inshore.
Yes. Very, very good tip. So Wyatt, what do you like? Are you back to Power Pro original? It sounds like.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm back to Power Pro original. I've tried a bunch of different braids. When I first started fishing, I used that Berkeley Nanofill. That was the first braid that I ever used. I enjoyed it for, just basic casting in the pond. It was okay. I found that it didn't hold up very well in terms of knot strength. And as we're on the topic of abrasion resistance, I actually had it break off in soft cover before as well. It wasn't a terribly strong line. Then I went to the spider wire, which, that was okay. I had issues with knots. And then when I found Power Pro, as I kind of started diving more into saltwater fishing, learning a lot from Salt Strong, that was kind of what was taught was, spool up 10-pound Power Pro. You're going to get good casting distance. I watched all of the knot strength tests and tutorials that Luke had put together years and years ago. And it was just like, there was no other line that I felt like I needed. And it's consistently produced for me. I've played with some others. That Suffix 832 is good as well. I never had any issues with it. I can't, I have wind knots with all kinds of different. I mean, I even get wind knots with the original Power Pro, but I don't remember the Suffix 832 having an excessive issue with it. So I'm okay with Suffix 832, but I trust the Power Pro a little bit more because I've used it a lot more, and it just tends to work really well for me. So I'm not going to switch up until I can get some. I was excited to try the $8,000, and I'll have to try it again on a non-windy day and maybe further test it. But I was excited to see that it had better abrasion resistance, which is important. I fish around a lot of oyster bars, which I have lost fish that have kind of ducked around the bar, or maybe I'm fishing a top water over it and they'll skip back around, and it's like, any advantage I can have on a fish, whether it's abrasion resistance, casting distance, not having as many wind knots, I'm going to try to maximize the amount of positive effects while minimizing negative effects. So I'm going to have to play with that $8,000 more and see what I can get with that.
Cool. Tony, what did you say offline about the Daiwa J-Braid, that it seems to be the best once you hit 20 pounds or higher? Is something like that?
Yeah, from some people I've talked to, I have some friends that use the $8,000 as well. And they say once you get into that, thicker diameter to 20, 30, 40, 50 pound, you don't seem to have that much issues with the wind knots. Like I was using 10 pound, and they said when you get to that really thin line, that very limp line, you're going to have a lot more issues. So I'm curious to see if, Justin, you have any issues, because I know you said you use mainly 20, 30 pound.
Yeah, I don't have, honestly, a lot to speak to for the 10-pound size, but for the 30-pound braid, it will hold up.
Whammy.
It'll hold up to Kubera snapper in 40-something feet of water with jagged rocks and oysters.
Look how happy you look there.
Yeah, super happy. So I mean, that was J-Braid $8,000 and 30 pound on a 6,000 with that's actually 60-pound leader, and I FG'd the two lines together. And from a knot strength standpoint, and from I don't know if that braid ever made contact with rocks and structure, but that would be the fish to test the tackle, and it survived it. So I've been happy with it from a heavier line class. That's what I've outfitted all of my heavier setups. Anytime I fish a bridge inshore, it's 20 pound. If I'm going to go offshore, I'm using 30. I'm pretty sold on it, but I'm excited to be there with you guys and try the 10. Personally, pop it on my setups. I'm sure it'll perform similar to the Suffix that I've used, but we'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah, I just bought a Quantum, the Baitcaster, and I'm going to put the 30 on there.
There you go.
So found it in chartreuse.
Weren't we using 30 when we were fishing for those sharks with Captain Mark?
Yep.
Those are like 5-6 foot lemon sharks we were catching on 30-pound J braid. Worked really well for that.
It's a super strong line.
Justin, for those fish that you were catching and you using that heavier J braid, I know you said you liked it a lot. How much kind of translating that fishing to inshore flats fishing, where you're making a lot of casts repeatedly over long distances, what you're doing, or is this, that similar type of fishing, or are you deep dropping, trolling, where you're not having to do repeated casts into the wind?
So that particular fish was caught, cast after cast. I was casting from like 55, 60 feet of water into 30, 35 feet of water where it was shelving out. And I was able to pull that Kubera out away from structure. And 30 feet there is pretty shallow for Kuberas. They'll head out to 100, 150 feet. But even when I go for tarpon, off the beach, and I've had a lot of success here recently with, 60 to 100 pound tarpon, casting 2-ounce, jig heads and long eel presentations, and have done very well. I've had 0 wind knots. I don't notice if my distance is any more or less. A lot of times I'm fishing at night, or I don't have 2 different braids on the water to check my distance with 30 pound. But overall, I've been happy with it. I don't feel like it's coming up short, so to speak.
Yeah, lure weight definitely comes into play. If you've got a heavy, 2-ounce jig on there, your line's really not slowing down as it's coming out of the spool and then through the guides.
I like your eel, bro.
Thanks, bro. Thank you, bro.
So Luke, what you've done probably the most like off the water testing with this $1,200 knot tester and stuff that you got. So in terms of like that 10 pound, the J Braid has been the strongest. Is that what I'm hearing in terms of?
J Braid has been the strongest. Yeah. So I now, if I'm just fishing and not testing out a line, I'm using Power Pro, original Power Pro, just for my, like really my flats, my just long distance casting. And I'm using J Braid for power. So for dock fishing, anytime where I'm not, so I need to do a casting contest on it, but yeah, so now this just J Braid 8 grand is my go-to. I mean, just given how strong it's proven to be. And I haven't used the 20 yet. I've only used the 10. I've only used it on one spool, and I use it. I was using it a lot when I guess toward the end of last year. I definitely did have. I know I at least had one wind knot, but I don't recall it being abnormally bad. It was on a windy day. I just kind of wrote it off as I just shouldn't have been casting into the wind. So I'll re-spool another one just to see. I'll do two rods, one with Power Pro, one with this 8 grand, and just fish them for a while and just see what the differences are on castability, on wind knots. I'd really like to have just one line just to say, okay, this is the best. Also got some NanoFill in, so people asked about testing this out, so that'll be added to the test, as well as this Beyond Braid that has been marketed extremely hard lately.
Why are you shaking your head?
I've used it. It's, it falls into that same category as that Guggen Braid. It's just, I don't enjoy it. I don't think it casts well. I didn't feel like, I felt knots slipping. I did not like either. Beyond Braid, the Guggen Braid, there's a couple braids out there I can absolutely trash. I was a gearhead for a really long time with trying all kinds of different stuff. And the Guggen's pretty recent. I wanted to give it a try, but I didn't like that either. And I feel like they fall in the same category with each other. They don't cast well. I don't like the way that the knots came together on them. Just not a fan.
I haven't seen a good review yet. I haven't played with it and touched it myself, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what you think about it, Luke. And I know you'll put it through the ringer and see if it's gonna stand on its own.
Yeah, it's a 20 pound. I don't use 20 quite as often, but I do have some 20 of this Power Pro Max Quattro that I've been wanting to test out, and so I'll be putting those head to head.
It's 25% thinner.
Yeah,
it says it right there on the package.
Yeah, it is thinner. What's that, Tony?
No, I said it says it right there on the packaging. So Beyond Braid, that's that camo one that was getting bashed on social media, right? Because they were saying they were alluding to the fact it was made in USA, and they got USA stickers all over it, and it's made in China.
Yeah, it's a little bit, yeah, I don't really care for that. So it has a flag in there, USA company, but I thought that legally you're supposed to put where it's made on the packaging somewhere, and I'm not seeing that anywhere on here.
It should be on the actual cardboard packaging.
It came like this. It didn't have any cardboard. It literally just this. And I was just looking at it. I was like, oh, I wonder where it's made. And
legally you do have to say that where it's made. So, but anyway, someone busted them. I think, I'm pretty sure it was a veteran that saw that and was just pissed off. And you should be like, don't market it as made in USA and put American flags all over it when it's made in China. Just say where it is, right? Half the stuff, made in Japan. It's pretty clear. Where's Power Pro made?
Power Pro's made in the US.
It is made, by Innovative Textiles. Look at that. Suffix is made in USA.
I think I only have the raw spool. I don't have the packaging. Mine says made in Taiwan. Yeah, Taiwan. Now, when it comes to lines, I don't know that we don't have to go too far down the rabbit hole of made in the USA, made in Japan products. Owner Hooks is not made in the USA, and Owner Hooks is perfection in hooks. Things made in Japan, from a fishing standpoint, there's a lot of really great quality products made in Japan. In general, it's wonderful to support USA products, but I wouldn't discredit the quality of a product, based on if it was made in Japan or USA.
Not at all. Every reel that we buy, every reel now sold, for the most part, for inshore fishing is not made in America. It was just, hey, be honest in your marketing. That was more the issue than, it's just, if you're trying to get someone to use your product, you don't have to be misleading on it right off the bat. And to your point, so far, most of the reviews seem to kind of stink. So I'd be interested to see what you say. So Luke, what was the worst so far in terms of strength? So best is J Braid, Iowa J Braid.
I don't remember. It was, It might have been the spider wire. I kind of write off as soon as it doesn't perform. I kind of just write it off. So it was either the Invisibraid or the Suffix. I can't remember, but either way, neither of them seem to compete with the Power Pro on the overall. But it's all documented too. You can just look on our site and just search, use that little search bar and search for the Suffix or the Power Pro, and all the stats are there. You know, all those tests, just like always, the tests are recorded, and so you can see what the process is. If something's wrong, you can let us know and we'll fix it and make it better.
Did you ever test out using 8 strands of your hair all braided together?
No, I'm still growing it out longer. That's my secret reason. And so that's
what is that now? It's like maybe 40 yards worth right there.
I got to fill up a spool. I got to be able to do a whole spool.
Luke braid. 10 pounds. So question we get all the time after, hey, what's the best braid? What's the best braid color? Wyatt shaking his head.
I just don't. I think it's such a silly argument because we tie on leaders to completely negate whether your main line has an effect on a fish strike or not. I think that the color of your braid is like the color of your popping cork. It should be whatever you can see easiest. That's my personal opinion on it. What do you guys think?
I mean, it depends on where you're fishing, I'm guessing. I mean, like looking at Luke's underwater trout footage that he published here, I mean, it wouldn't matter what was on there. I mean, he had a 6-inch like monster camera, trolling right there where the leader meets the line, the main line. I don't know that it matters, to your point. But then again, there's some people that swear by it. Luke, have you ever started your test? Your underwater?
That won't be on the braid. That's all about the mono and fluoro.
Oh, you're going to do all mono and fluoro. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think the braid color matters. Like Wyatt said, like the fish are cute ink. So for the longest time, I was a camo, right? I started with Power Pro. I started with the original Power Pro, dark green, moss green is the term. And so I was diehard moss green. And then one time they were out, and I got the yellow. That was right when we started Salt Strong.
High
so
vis yellow.
And and Joe, remember we took Chris Olt out? We went fishing over in Bay Pines, and Chris had won one of our online tournaments that we did at the very beginning. And it was my first time using the high vis yellow. And I was like nervous. I was like, oh man, like I don't like having like testing stuff while I've taken a client, taking this guy we were trying to impress. Like we just started Salt Strong. Like, this is gonna be so embarrassing if we don't catch anything. And this 8 strand was like, the high vis did extremely good. Like I felt super comfortable, and I really like the fact, as Wyatt said, that I could actually see my line. That was a huge benefit. And so really from that day forward, I really started switching everything over to yellow, the high vis, just for the fact that I could see it better and that I didn't see any difference at all in fish strikes. And so for a while I was using green, yellow, right? I have a couple rods of each and still never saw a noticeable difference. So I just migrated over to yellow. Now I'm having to go back to green because yellow is hard to get. Like it's been out everywhere. And again, now that I'm going back to green from yellow, I can't tell a difference at all. So I don't, long story short, I don't think it matters as long as you're using a leader. If you're going straight to the lure, then maybe so. But if you're using a leader, it doesn't seem to matter.
Tony, Justin?
I've always stuck with just moss green. Again, coming from bass fishing, that's all we use because we're fishing in grass and it blends in really well with the grass. And you're not really using leader when you're bass fishing. You're just tying straight 50-pound rope to your lure. So I've always stuck with moss green, and I'm one of those people that's just a firm believer. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't like to switch to new things just to try them out. I like to use what works.
And it kind of reminds me of mossy oak camo that I wear when I'm pulling out my 4-pound ditch pickles on my 50-pound braid.
But the only reason I did use a gray, it's like I guess it was, trying to think of what the color was called, but right now it's a grayish color just because the color's faded a little bit. And that was the V2 just because I couldn't, like Luke's point, I couldn't find the moss green in that color or that type of braid. So I just went with that color and I don't really see any difference.
Yeah. And I would agree. Color is irrelevant, really.
It just fades anyway.
Yeah. I've gone with white and gray for so long. Just because it's striking. Like I'm very cosmetic in my stuff. There's so many reels and rods and custom stuff I've had done, and I'm like, if the color really, it's striking. It's just pretty, guys. And yeah, I like gray. It's unique. There's only like one or two companies that make that color, so I stick with it. But in terms of performance, nah, it's negligible. But one thing that's interesting, Tony, I remember I went fishing with a guy down in Okeechobee. We were flipping and pitching, and he had moss green braid, and he would take a black Sharpie and he would Sharpie like the last 36 inches or so of his braid black. He's like, no. I get way more strikes when I like Sharpie up my line. And I never really thought about that. I've never seen anybody do it. But it did make me wonder in that application, if having like a blacked out or really dark line did make a difference when flipping and pitching in heavy structure for bass. Most guys use dark moss green or just dark green, but he's like, no, this is like a whole nother level. It makes a big difference. Could just be superstition, but that was the only time I was like, oh, you have to like actually make it a certain color to be better, right? Otherwise, for inshore, I don't think it matters.
Yeah, I've heard that too. But the guys that I saw do it, they would color in like 2 inches, like every 2 inches they would color in. So it's almost like a camo pattern. They would do that.
Then you got the negative scents on there.
Yeah, it seems like a bad idea.
Yeah,
like
I wouldn't
it works. It
permanent
works.
marker.
I have to imagine it's in between the ears only, for in between the human ears only.
Yeah,
I don't think the fish care.
Yeah, once again, you're talking about 2-pound bass that are clearly ignoring 50-pound braided line. It's still so funny. And we grew up bass fishing. I get it. That's why we're poking fun at it. I got some 50-pound on one of my reels back there, and it gets used for freshwater fishing.
I just can't get through the concept of targeting a bass with 50-pound line or more. I just can't.
When you're fishing like, Lake Toho, Lake Kissimmee, heavy structure, they don't really see the line. I mean, they see a lure moving. If you're fishing a clear lake, like up north, you have a lot of clear lakes. A lot of those guys mainly use mono just because it's cleaner. And when we do bass fish here, if we get into a clean lake like Conway or the Butler Chain or something like that, a lot of guys like to go with mono instead. Those fish can see it. I do believe that.
No, but if you go thick enough, they just think it's like another lily pad stem. Like, oh, yeah, it's just a 50-pound lily pad stem.
Listen, I've lost like flipping and pitching up in Orange Lake in Gainesville. I was on the bass team using 30-pound braid on my saltwater low round baitcasters. I had 30-pound braid on it. I was like, I can flip and pitch with this, and I lost multiple fish that must have been 8 or 9 pounds. I go to set the hook on them, flipping in heavy structure, and I don't feel any resistance. I just pull back barren braid, and the guy on the boat's like, dude, you need like 50 or 65-pound braid. You need to quit playing around. And he pulled out like 2 9 or 10-pound fish in front of me. So crazy. It's like you never think about it, because as an inshore guy, even in structure, we're like 30-pound braid gets it done for most heavy structure situations. But when you're freshwater fishing, people are like, why do you need 65? I'll tell you firsthand, if I'm going to flip and pitch, I'm going to use like 80 or, something ridiculous, because I don't want to lose a 9-pounder for like the 2 times I freshwater fish.
What I want to know is, how did you have time to be a cheerleader, play in the band, and be on the fishing team?
Like I said, man, they don't throw the word prodigy around often, but every now and again you can do it all.
Yes.
Nice. Well played.
Well played. Well played. 2 points for Justin. Sorry, let's all pick. So let's stick with just 10, because that's what we're usually going with for inshore saltwater fishing. Tony, what do you got? If you're going to stick with one, your confidence, and you got to pick the brand and the color.
Original 4-strand Power Pro moss green. That would be my go-to.
Okay.
I was expecting V2. That was a surprise.
Yep. What?
Yeah, still trying it out.
Original V2 4-strand high vis. I just don't think it, like Tony said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I've tried a lot, and I mean, it hasn't been beaten in my opinion.
Justin?
I have had Suffix A32 in white on 4 different setups for the past year and a half, and have not needed to change it. I've been happy with it, but I'm going to be fishing with this J-Braid 8 Grand in 10-pound gray light. and I will get back to everybody and let you know what I think about it. But I'm a suffix guy right now until I start some of the lighter stuff on Braid.
Cool. Lukey?
Yeah, I mean, I just like Justin. Right now, I have to stick with my most trusted that I've been using, and it's that Power Pro 10 and the high vis yellow, just because I can see it better. But if I'm gonna put on another spool of this J 8 grand and see, at least see if there's a noticeable difference. But yeah, right now I got to go. Long story short, I got to go Power Pro original.
Yep. And I'm gonna say I'm torn between Power Pro and this Braid. I used it to outfish Luke here recently, and
Is that what we were using last time?
Yeah. Well, I had actually, one reel had, and I caught a fish on trout on bows. So
you were on fire when you got that trout, that big trout and that snook.
Mm-hmm. Keep talking about that, huh?
Yeah, about time you showed me up.
How many casts are you making? Are you just waiting until Luke starts catching fish and then casting, or?
He was doing that. I missed a fish, and I see him there as fast as he possibly could.
But it's a legitimate strategy, Tony.
All right? It's a smart strategy. I don't have to waste any energy. I'm just kind of watching. I'm like, all right, you missed one there, right behind him.
What line were you using though? Because you caught two big fish right in my face.
Yeah, I was using the on one. It was that Island Blue. 8 grand, and the other one was just normal. I think it was the normal Power Pro. I don't even know what it is. It's just old line, so been on there for a year. The line's not what catches fish. It's Slam Shitty 2.0 is really what takes credit for it. So
yeah, you were on fire that trip.
Last time I checked, the fish aren't biting the line; they're biting the lure. And it even outfished live bait. People are, that was crazy. Luke, like we caught this live bait. We're doing a video for Blackout Chum because that stuff works. And maybe it's just the confidence and maybe we just get bored, but remember that was crazy. Luke literally doing a tutorial of fishing live bait on a popping cork, and I'm just throwing Slam Shady around them, just like killing time, and I'm actually catching fish. He's like, what is happening here?
And going up to the live bait spot, we both caught multiple fish. So we got multiple like trout, most of which were over 20 inches. And then we get to the spot that's had the most fish. And I was doing the live bait tutorial thinking that we're going to crush them. And Joe caught a couple. When I was trying to do live bait, Joe caught a couple more. And then we finally caught a trout with live bait, and it was the smallest trout of the day. And then as we were going out, we were throwing lures, and then Joe caught that nice snook and then a 24-inch trout. So I was just like, man, this live bait stuff isn't as easy as I thought it used to be. It was tough.
Well, at least you can sport your braid, as our friend Captain Jeff Maggio would say. Lunker dog. Guys out there sporting their braid, matching the rod, matching the reel, matching their cork. Sport the braid. Cool. Well, this has been fun. The good news is we'll continue to keep testing this, not just on the water, because that is important to Tony's point and Wyatt's point, not just see, hey, what's got the best knot strength, because if it's getting wind knots every other cast, it's pretty annoying. But then again, I think we should all probably try multiple sizes on different reels, and sometimes it's even how you spool it. And even just how much line, that could be a whole nother podcast about just the right way to spool it. And you see some people you fish with, and they have like an inch and a half, gap in there, and some people fill it all the way out to the very end, and that can definitely make a difference as well. So that'll be another fun podcast for us. But other than that, come join us in the Insider Club. We have everything there in the store, fishstrong.com, up to 20% off or more, including all of our lines and leaders and lures, rods, reels. What else do we have in there? All kinds of new accessories. Unless you're a member, Insider member, you can't get this red hat. We're giving away for free here in the month of April. All you have to do is be active in the community and spend $20. You get a free $20 hat. One more reason, we're trying to come up with some cool stuff this year just to reward our Insider members. Just one more reason to be a member and get free gear. And of course, we're still doing the Monday giveaways, and we're gonna start up in the game here with some pretty cool giveaway stuff for our members. So I think we just hit, what is it, 20-something thousand members?
That's the count.
Woo! So awesome. We're having fun. Got some new help coming in terms of some content creators. We're going to have a little bit more beach fishing, maybe even a little pier fishing. We got some new mastery courses we're working on for our members. We talked about this morning, a potential topwater mastery, sheep's head mastery, Spanish mackerel mastery, rod mastery. That was Justin's, our boy Wonder over here. That's gonna be kind of cool. That was an interesting inner circle. I went and rewatched a big chunk of that. It's really good. It's amazing how confusing it is because none of these manufacturers use the same rules and guidelines.
Yeah, it was a tip of the iceberg conversation on that inner circle call. A lot to go into. Just like braided line, reels and rods, I think are those three that a lot of people want to know more about. They want to know the nitty gritty and the bones. What to talk about.
And then finally, we're going to have another podcast and a whole blog post. A lot of people have asked, just what do you guys recommend right now overall, right? Because we have 5 people here who all, for the most part, disagreed. A lot of hanging chads. But we can also agree, like, hey, if it was just, I could only buy one thing, one rod, one reel, one topwater, one soft plastic, what would I use? And so we're going to put together essentially a checklist of, hey, here's the 15 items, maybe 20 that you have to be successful. It just a bare minimum, because that question comes up all the time. And we're coming together just to agree upon, all right, this is for the best value. We're not, saying, hey, if this is completely cheap, or hey, if you want to go completely premium, different ball game, but for just overall best value to go out there and catch inshore slams all year long, anywhere from Texas to Florida to Virginia, or anywhere between, here's what you need. And that'll be a fun one. We've been having some fun kind of building out of the back end. So it's going to be super, super helpful. Cool. You guys got anything else?
Yeah.
Well,
more line tests coming soon.
Woo! Yep. Stay tuned there at saltwater.com. Join us in the Insider Club. We are there for you. That's where we're spending all of our time in the community now. We've got Austin, we got Richard in there now. We have all the full-time coaches. They're willing to help. So all about the discounts, the premium content, and of course, just an amazing community. I know Victor, I believe, is going to be putting on an event coming up soon for insiders, a big cookout. He's big into pig roasting. And so I'm pumped to finally get out and start doing some of these meetups again. So if you're an insider member, make sure to get in the community. There's an event tab. We'll start posting more of these upcoming events here this summer, now that a lot of people are getting their vaccines and or just over it and or have had it and just ready to go out there and socialize again. So, and Wyatt, your eyes looking a whole lot better, man. It's like 100% healed.
Yeah. No more big ugly shiner. So I was happy to hop on the podcast today, not look bad for you guys.
Love it. All right, guys, good stuff. We appreciate you. All you audience members, we appreciate you big time. You Insider Club members, we appreciate you big time. You are a family. You're the foundation of this company. And if there's anything we can do to better serve you, let us know. We're always an email, a phone call away. And of course, in the Insider community, that's where I'm going next here to spend a little time to catch up. We're always in there. We love to hear from you. Otherwise, we'll talk to you on the next episode. Peace.
Yeah.